deal. Make no mistake about it, folks. Every time the owners came to the table and said, fine, we'll increase the salary cap to this, you can thank Caitlin Clark. Every time the owner said, fine, we'll pay for your housing again, you can thank Caitlin Clark. Every time the owner said, shoot, we really don't want to come up off this 15% number, but you know what? We'll move a little bit. You can thank CC22.
Let's talk about what just happened. The WNBA and its players' union just agreed to a landmark collective bargaining agreement, and if you're paying attention, you know exactly who made this possible. The salary cap jumped from $1.5 million to $7 million. Revenue sharing went from 15% to nearly 20%. Housing is now fully covered, and every single one of those victories has one name written all over it. This isn't speculation, this is cause and effect. The players had leverage this time because they could point to concrete numbers that didn't exist before. Record ratings, sold out arenas, social media engagement that dwarfed previous seasons, and all of that traces back to one player's impact on the league.
And on the player side, the only reason why they had the battery in the back that they had was because of Caitlin Clark's impact. All of the numbers and the metrics that the players could point to, do you see these ratings? Well, Caitlin Clark effect. Do you see this attendance? Well, Caitlin Clark effect. Do you see the social media impressions? Well, Caitlin Clark effect. This is called the Caitlin Clark stimulus package, and it will go down as such.
Here's what the numbers actually show. When the WNBA Players Association walked into those negotiation rooms, they came armed with data that previous negotiating committees could only dream about. The 2024 season saw viewership increases of over 400% for games featuring certain matchups. Attendance records were shattered across the league. The Indiana Fever went from playing in front of half-empty arenas to selling out every single game and having to move to larger venues for playoff games. That's not normal growth. That's not gradual improvement. That's a seismic shift in the league's economic reality. And when you have that kind of ammunition, suddenly the owners can't just say no to your demands. They're looking at their own balance sheets and realizing they're actually making money now.
They were sitting outside the hotel waiting for the scoop. Oopsie. 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 Shams got it first. New salary cap starting at $7 million, up from $1.5 million. Nice. Average revenue share of nearly 20% across the deal. Supermax starting at $1.4 million. Average salary in the range of $600,000, minimum above $300,000.
Now let's break down what the players actually got here. The new salary cap starts at $7 million, up from $1.5 million. That's not doubling, that's not tripling, that's nearly 5 times the previous cap. The Supermax contract starts at $1.4 million annually. The average salary lands around $600,000, and the minimum salary jumps above $300,000. Compare that to where negotiations started. The owners opened at $5.5 million for the salary cap. The players wanted $9.5 million. They met almost in the middle at $7 million. On revenue sharing, owners wanted to stay at 15%. Players demanded 30%. They settled at nearly 20%. On paper, it looks like the players compromised more. They came down from 9.5 to 7 on the cap. They came down from 30 to 20 on revenue share. But here's what that analysis misses.
This is what the players called standing on business. Supermax starting at 1.4, solid W. It's the owner saying, yeah, here, take some money. Average salary in the range of $600K, it's the owner saying, here, take some money. Below it was reported from $600K to a little bit over $500K. Okay. Minimum above 300, 300, from a little bit above 200. Fair play to the players there.
David Sampson raised an interesting point that's worth considering. He's a former MLB executive who knows how these negotiations actually work behind closed doors. His take? The owners were probably prepared to go higher than 20% on revenue sharing. They built their financial models expecting to land somewhere in the high 20s or even low 30s. But they got the players to settle at 20, which means the players might have left money on the table. Think about how negotiations work. You never open with your actual number. The owners said 15%, knowing full well they'd have to go higher. The players said 30%, knowing they wouldn't get there. The real question is where each side was actually willing to land And if Sampson is right, the owners just got the players to accept a deal that was below what they were prepared to offer. But here's the thing, the players are celebrating. Caitlin Clark released a statement. Breanna Stewart called it transformational. Brianna Turner talked about how honored she was to advocate for past, present, and future players. They genuinely believe they won this negotiation.
Now, David Sampson actually puts up a good point over here. That, you know what, maybe the owners were willing to give up a little bit more, but let's take a listen.
Because that's the fight that you're going to have when you get a percentage of revenue that is fixed. The WNBA players are trying to get a fixed percentage of revenue, and they're going to claim victory when that number is in the 20s.
And maybe they did win, even if they didn't maximize every dollar. Because sometimes winning isn't about getting the absolute highest number possible. Sometimes it's about getting enough to fundamentally change the trajectory of your league. Let's put these salaries in context. $300,000 minimums mean that every player in the WNBA can now make a living wage without having to play overseas in the offseason. That's massive for quality of life and injury prevention. $600,000 average salaries mean that mid-tier players, the solid starters, and sixth women who make up the backbone of every team can actually build financial security. They can buy homes, they can invest, they can plan for life after basketball. $1.4 million Supermax contracts mean that the league's absolute best players are finally getting paid like elite professional athletes. Is it NBA money? No, but it doesn't have to be. The WNBA's revenue is a fraction of the NBA's revenue. What matters is whether the players are getting a fair share of what their league generates. And at 20% revenue sharing, that's approaching the percentage that NBA players get.
Expansion draft will be between April 1st and the 6th. Qualifying offers can be made April 7th through the 8th. Free agency negotiation period is April 9th through the 11th. Free agency signing period is April 12th through the 18th. Then training camp begins April 18th. Starting April 1st, we will have 18 straight days of chaos. I'm here for it. I'm really looking forward to this brief free agency negotiation.
Now here's where the timeline gets interesting. Starting April 1st, we're gonna see 18 straight days of absolute chaos in the WNBA. The expansion draft happens between April 1st and 6th. That's when the Golden State Valkyries will select players from existing rosters to build their inaugural team. Then qualifying offers can be made April 7th through 8th. That's teams extending offers to their own restricted free agents. Free agency negotiation period runs April 9th through 11th. That's when teams can talk to unrestricted free agents but can't officially sign them yet. Then free agency signing period opens April 12th through 18th. That's when deals actually get done and announced.
Free agency signing period. The qualifying offers. How fast are these deals going to get done? And whichever team is best thinking on their feet, that's the team that's going to have the best free agency. Whichever team can think on their feet the best and manage the new salary cap most efficiently, that's the team that's going to win this offseason. It's not going to be necessarily about signing the big names. It's going to be, do you sign the quality players that you need at a reasonable price?
Look at some of the names hitting unrestricted free agency. Alyssa Thomas, Kelsey Plum, Kalea Copper, Kelsey Mitchell, Sophie Cunningham. These are all star caliber players who can sign with any team they want. The Fever could theoretically pursue Alyssa Thomas to pair with Caitlin Clark. The Mercury could go after Kelsey Mitchell to replace what they're losing. The Aces might need to make moves to stay under the new cap while keeping their core together. And here's what's fascinating. Under the old salary structure, teams couldn't really compete for top free agents because there wasn't enough money to make compelling offers. Everyone was basically maxed out at poverty wages. But now you can actually offer a player like Kelsey Mitchell a super max contract that's worth $1.4 million annually. That's real money. That's enough to make a player seriously consider changing teams. Sophie Cunningham is going to get paid. The question is whether Phoenix can afford to keep her or if another team swoops in with a better offer. Same with Kelsey Plum in Las Vegas. The Aces have championship aspirations, but they also have to manage a salary cap. Now, decisions have to be made.
A group of reporters literally camped outside of the offices where CBA negotiations took place, and this guy still got the details first. Shams after watching WNBA reporters on the sidewalk for 8 nights. W Twitter going to get mad at you for leaking this. So sitting outside the doors for a week got them folks what exactly? Oh, that's funny. Oh man. Coming day after, or yup. WNBA media about to have another crash out that someone else got the info before.
And we can't ignore the elephant in the room. Shams Charania broke the story first. He got the details of the CBA agreement before any of the WNBA beat reporters who had literally been camping outside the negotiation venue for over a week. And the WNBA media world lost its mind. You had reporters on Twitter saying that if the news didn't come from their approved list of insiders, it wasn't real. That's gatekeeping at its finest. Here's what actually happened. Shams has sources inside the Players Union and inside league offices because he's a credible national reporter who covers all of basketball. He's not dependent on staying in the good graces of WNBA PR departments because he's not a beat reporter. So when the deal got done, his sources gave him the information and he reported it. That's journalism. But the WNBA media ecosystem has become so insular and protective that they genuinely believe they were the only ones who could possibly have access to this information. They thought camping outside the building gave them some kind of monopoly on the story. And when someone from outside their circle broke it first, they couldn't handle it. They tried to delegitimize the report instead of just acknowledging that they got beat on their own story.
In case you guys aren't aware of the crash out, they were literally saying, if it's not coming from the 4 of us, it's not real. Thinking that they were the only ones with the inside scoop. They're the only one with sources inside the building. That's the gatekeeping that goes on over here in the WNBA media. And you saw a little bit of it if you tuned in to Venom's stream. You got a taste of the gatekeeping that they do. Sham Charania said, watch this. Watch this. Shout out to you, Shams. WNBA players celebrate news of new CBA deal. Indiana Fever guard Caitlin Clark, speaking from experience, players like me are going to be the ones that I think feel it the most, and that's what I think we're all super proud of, because that's what we set out from the beginning, was making sure every player felt a change in the CBA, and that's exactly what has happened. New York Liberty forward Breanna Stewart, the deal is going to be transformational. It's going to build up and help create a system where everybody's getting exactly what they deserve, and more from on the court and the off court aspects. Just excited that we can tell our fans that we're going to be back. Brianna Turner, Indiana Fever ex-forward, Brianna Turner. I truly didn't recognize the dedication and time it takes to build relationships and truly listen to the needs and wants of union members. This process was so eye-opening to me. It's been a true honor to help advocate for the past, present, and future. Seattle Storm guard Lexi Brown responding to Washington Mystics forward Alicia Clark on Threads, and that's how you stand on business. They came down more than the owners in rev share. They came down more than the owners in salary cap. But you know what? You got the 20% like the owner. Like Dave Sampson said, you know what? You got your 20%. This makes you feel good. Then let's wrap this up and sign on the dotted line. Erica Wheeler said, Alexa, play We Gonna Be Alright by Kendrick. Brittany Griner said, let's hoop. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I appreciate all of the support. It feels good knowing that we're going to have a season, knowing that we are going to have Caitlin Clark hoops throughout the summer. Something that was brought to my attention. Shout out to Duke. I believe the season's gonna have a little bit of a pause from late August, correct? For the FIBA World Cup games, right? We're gonna have a slight pause and then resume action. It's gonna be a hot summer. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. Like the video. See you next time, as always.
So let's bring this all together and talk about what this CBA actually means for the future of the WNBA. Because the money is important, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is what this deal represents about the league's trajectory and sustainability. First, the players now have a legitimate revenue sharing model. 20% might not sound like a lot, but it's structured to scale with league growth. If the WNBA's revenue doubles over the next 5 years, which is entirely possible given current trends, player salaries automatically increase proportionally. That's huge. That means players are genuinely invested in growing the league because they directly benefit from that growth. Second, the salary cap structure creates actual competitive balance. Under the old system, every team was basically broke and couldn't afford to build through free agency. Now teams have real decisions to make. Do you pay 3 players supermax money and fill out the roster with minimum contracts? Do you spread the wealth and build depth? Do you go all in for a championship window or rebuild for the future? These are the kinds of strategic questions that make leagues interesting. Third, and this might be the most underrated aspect, the housing provision removes a major quality of life issue that's plagued the league for years. Players were making poverty wages and then having to find their own housing in expensive cities during the season. Some players were living with host families, some were splitting apartments with teammates to save money. That's not professional sports, that's college with a paycheck. Now teams have to provide housing, which means players can actually focus on basketball instead of worrying about rent. Fourth, the elimination of overseas play requirements changes everything for player development and injury prevention. For years, WNBA players had no choice but to play in Europe, Russia, China, or Australia during the off-season because their WNBA salaries weren't enough to live on. That meant playing basketball year-round with no real off-season for rest and recovery. It meant accumulating wear and tear on their bodies. It meant increased injury risk. Now, with $600,000 average salaries, players can choose to just play in the WNBA and take the off-season to actually recover. Fifth, this deal sets up the league for its next phase of growth. The Golden State Valkyries are joining as the 13th team. There are rumors of additional expansion to 15 or 16 teams in the next few years. The new CBA provides a financial framework that can support that expansion. It ensures that new teams can compete for talent and that existing teams aren't punished for the league growing. But here's what we need to talk about, honestly. This deal doesn't happen without Caitlin Clark. Not because she negotiated it, not because she's a union representative, but because she fundamentally changed the economic reality of the WNBA in a single season. The league went from a charity case that the NBA subsidized to a legitimate business that generates real revenue. That transformation gave the players leverage they've never had before. Look at what the players could point to in negotiations. The Indiana Fever went from averaging under 4,000 fans per game to selling out 17,000-seat arenas. WNBA games that used to draw a few 100,000 viewers on ESPN were suddenly pulling 2 to 3 million. Social media engagement exploded. Merchandise sales went through the roof. And all of that created a financial foundation that made these salary increases possible. The owners aren't giving this money out of generosity. They're giving it because they're making money and they want to avoid a work stoppage that would kill the momentum the league finally has. The players aren't accepting this deal because they think it's perfect. They're accepting it because it's the best deal they've ever had, and they know that continuing to negotiate risks losing the season and all the goodwill the league has built. Now, does that mean Caitlin Clark should get a cut of every player's salary increase? Of course not. She's one player on one team. She didn't single-handedly transform the league, but she was the catalyst. She was the spark that ignited interest from casual sports fans who had never watched the WNBA before. And that interest translated into revenue, and that revenue translated into leverage, and that leverage translated into this CBA. The players who came before her, legends like Lisa Leslie and Diana Taurasi and Maya Moore, they built the foundation. They kept the league alive through years of financial struggle. They proved that women's basketball could be played at an elite level, but they didn't have the media ecosystem and cultural moment that Caitlin Clark walked into. She had the perfect combination of talent, personality, college success, and timing to become a mainstream star in a way that previous WNBA players couldn't. And here's the uncomfortable truth that some people don't want to acknowledge. The WNBA's previous approach of demanding that fans support the league out of some obligation to women's sports wasn't working. Attendance was stagnant, ratings were declining, the league was losing money every year. What changed wasn't that people suddenly became more enlightened about gender equality in sports. What changed was that a player emerged who was compelling enough to make casual fans actually want to watch. That's not a criticism of previous players, that's just reality. Sports is entertainment. People watch what entertains them. Caitlin Clark entertains people. She makes ridiculous shots from 30 feet. She talks trash. She shows emotion. She has rivalries. She gives great interviews. She's marketable in a way that transcends basketball, and that marketability translated into eyeballs, and eyeballs translated into revenue, and revenue translated into this CBA. So when you see players celebrating this deal, when you see Breanna Stewart calling it transformational, and Brianna Turner talking about advocating for future generations, understand what they're really celebrating. They're celebrating the fact that the WNBA finally has a sustainable economic model. They're celebrating the fact that future players won't have to struggle the way they did. They're celebrating the fact that women's professional basketball in America finally feels like it has a real future. But they should also acknowledge how they got here. This deal doesn't happen in 2023. It doesn't happen in 2022. It happens in 2025 because of what happened in 2024. And what happened in 2024 was the Caitlin Clark effect. The stimulus package, the economic transformation that gave the players the leverage they needed to negotiate a deal that actually changes lives. The question now is what happens next. Can the league maintain this momentum? Will other stars emerge who can carry the torch? Will the Golden State Valkyries bring in new fans on the West Coast? Will the expanded playoff format create more compelling storylines? Will the increased salaries allow players to focus solely on the WNBA and elevate the level of play? These are the questions that will determine whether this CBA is remembered as the moment the WNBA became a legitimate major professional sports league or just a temporary spike in interest that eventually faded. My bet is on the former. The infrastructure is now in place. The financial model works. The talent is there. The cultural moment is right. The WNBA has everything it needs to succeed long term. But it all started with one player changing the economic equation. And that's why this will always be known as the Caitlin Clark stimulus package, whether people want to admit it or not. So here's my question for you. Do you think the players left money on the table by settling at 20% revenue sharing? Or did they make the smart play by taking a good deal and securing the season? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I want to hear what you think. And if you found this breakdown valuable, hit that like button and subscribe because we're going to be covering every move of this wild off season starting April 1st.